A millionaire enters the room and sees his poor maid breastfeeding her newborn child. The initial shock gives way to a decision no one could have foreseen. Amid judgments, intrigues, and secrets, the truth about that moment comes to light. And what he chooses to do forever changes the fate of everyone involved. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. A baby's cry echoed relentlessly through the corridors of the Anderson estate in Westchester County, New York. The high-pitched wail seemed to penetrate the marble walls, ignored by everyone, except for a young cleaning woman named Olivia Reed. At 24, Olivia's face still carried the fresh marks of grief. Each plaintive cry from the infant upstairs pierced her heart like a dagger, awakening an instinct stronger than reason, the urge to protect. 6 weeks ago, Olivia had held her own son in her arms as his tiny body grew cold. Complications during childbirth that the doctors couldn't explain. The hospital offered condolences. Her boyfriend offered blame before walking out. Now she worked at the Anderson mansion to pay mounting medical bills, scrubbing floors while her breasts still occasionally leaked milk, a cruel reminder of what she had lost. Upstairs, 2-month-old Ethan Anderson lay in a state of neglect. His nanny, Brittany Taylor, hired through a prestigious agency that catered to Westchester's elite, had left to buy formula 3 hours ago. In reality, she was at the Westchester Mall, trying on designer clothes and updating her Instagram, completely absorbed in her personal life. The baby's father, Maxwell Anderson, a widowed tech entrepreneur, sat locked in his home office on a video conference with potential investors, pretending not to hear his son's desperate cries. His priority was securing funding for his startup's expansion, not tending to his son's suffering. Olivia had been dusting the grand piano in the living room when the crying began. At first, she tried to ignore it. Not her child, not her place. But an hour passed, then 2. The cries grew hoarse, desperate. She checked her phone. No messages from Brittany announcing her return. She knocked on Maxwell's office door, but the only response was his raised hand signaling her to go away as he continued his pitch to the investors on screen. "Just 5 more minutes," he mouthed. But Olivia had worked here long enough to know that 5 minutes meant an hour in Maxwell Anderson's world. As the crying continued, something inside Olivia snapped. A maternal instinct, dormant since her loss but never truly extinguished, flared to life. She abandoned her cleaning cart and rushed up the spiral staircase, her heart pounding against her ribs. The nursery door stood slightly ajar. Inside, the room was a vision in pale blue and white, equipped with every luxury a baby could need. A handcrafted Italian crib, a state-of-the-art humidifier, a custom-painted mural of the New York skyline spanning one wall. Yet amidst all this opulence, little Ethan lay red-faced and trembling, his onesie soaked with sweat, his diaper clearly unchanged for hours. Olivia's hands shook as she approached the crib. She'd never touched Mr. Anderson's son before. It wasn't part of her job description, but the baby's flushed cheeks and labored breathing alarmed her trained maternal eye. She placed a gentle hand on his forehead and gasped at the heat radiating from his skin. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, lifting him carefully. "You're burning up." Ethan's cries momentarily intensified at the stranger's touch, then began to subside as Olivia cradled him against her shoulder, patting his back in slow, soothing circles. She quickly assessed the situation. The baby was dehydrated, feverish, and desperately hungry. The bottle by the crib contained only a few dried drops of formula. The changing table held an empty container of wipes and just 2 remaining diapers. "Where is that woman?" Olivia muttered, referring to Brittany as she carried Ethan to the adjoining bathroom. She dampened a soft washcloth with cool water and gently wiped his flushed face and neck. The baby whimpered but leaned into her touch. Olivia changed his diaper with practiced hands, talking softly to him the entire time. "There we go, little one. That's better, isn't it?" "Yes, it is, you poor thing, all alone up here." But the baby was still clearly hungry, and Olivia knew the signs of dehydration when she saw them. She needed to find him something to drink immediately. Balancing Ethan on her hip, She searched the nursery for formula, but found only an empty container. The refrigerator in the adjoining kitchenette yielded nothing but Brittany's protein shakes and a half-empty bottle of Chardonnay. Ethan's cries weakened, which worried Olivia even more. She knew that when babies stopped crying, it wasn't always a good sign. As she paced the nursery, bouncing him gently, she felt a familiar sensation in her chest, the letdown reflex, triggered by the baby's cries. A damp spot appeared on her uniform where Ethan's head rested. Olivia froze, torn by an impossible choice. She was still producing milk, not as much as before, but enough. The baby needed nourishment now. Waiting for Brittany to return or for Maxwell to finish his meeting could put Ethan at risk, especially with his fever. Her mind raced through alternatives. She could interrupt Maxwell's meeting again, but he'd made it clear he didn't want to be disturbed. She could call an ambulance, but would they arrive in time? And what would Maxwell do if she called emergency services without his permission? Ethan's whimpers grew fainter, his little body limp in her arms. The decision crystallized in an instant of clarity. Olivia sat in the plush nursing chair by the window, adjusted her uniform and guided Ethan to her breast. After a moment's hesitation, his survival instinct took over, and he began to nurse weakly at first, then with increasing strength. Relief washed over Olivia as the baby drank. Tears streamed down her face, for her lost son, for this neglected child, for the twisted circumstances that had brought them together. Outside the large bay windows, the manicured gardens of the Anderson estate stretched toward the horizon, a stark contrast to the human drama unfolding within these walls. "It's okay," she whispered to Ethan, stroking his soft hair. "You're going to be okay now." What Olivia didn't notice was the door to the nursery slowly opening wider, or the silhouette of Maxwell Anderson standing frozen in the doorway, his expression shifting from shock to confusion to something unreadable as he watched his son being nursed by the woman who cleaned his floors. Maxwell Anderson stood motionless, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the nursery floor. The conference call had ended early when his internet connection unexpectedly dropped, something that never happened with his enterprise-grade setup. He'd finally decided to check on Ethan, expecting to find Brittany tending to him. Instead, he found this scene that left him speechless. "Mr. Anderson," Olivia gasped, immediately trying to cover herself while keeping Ethan secure. The baby, for the first time since Maxwell could remember, wasn't crying. Instead, he was peaceful, his tiny hand resting against Olivia's chest. "What are you doing?" Maxwell's voice was surprisingly quiet, lacking the authoritative edge that normally characterized his interactions with household staff. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest. "Sir, I can explain. Your son was alone, dehydrated, with a fever. Ms. Taylor left hours ago and hasn't returned. He needed immediate care." Maxwell stepped into the room, his expression unreadable. At 36, grief had etched permanent lines around his eyes. Since losing his wife, Catherine, during childbirth, he'd retreated into his work, leaving Ethan's care entirely to hired help. "Where's Brittany?" he asked, glancing around as if the nanny might materialize from behind the curtains. "She said she was going to buy formula, sir. That was 3 hours ago." Olivia carefully adjusted her clothing and shifted Ethan to her shoulder, patting his back gently. "I tried to tell you, but you were in your meeting." Maxwell ran a hand through his dark hair, disheveled from hours of anxious tugging during the investor call. "And you thought this was appropriate?" He gestured vaguely toward her. Olivia straightened her spine, still patting Ethan's back. "With all due respect, Mr. Anderson, what was appropriate was making sure your son didn't end up in the emergency room. He's dehydrated, feverish, and hadn't been changed or fed for hours. I made a judgment call." As if to support her statement, Ethan let out a contented sigh, nuzzling against her neck. The sound, so unfamiliar to Maxwell, caused something to shift in his expression. "You said he has a fever," Maxwell approached, tentatively extending a hand toward his son's forehead. The gesture was awkward, unpracticed. "He does feel warm." "He needs to see a doctor," Olivia said firmly. "And I'm sorry for overstepping, but he needed to eat. She hesitated. then decided the truth was necessary. I lost my baby 6 weeks ago. I'm still producing milk. Maxwell's eyes widened. Slightly. I didn't know about your child, I'm sorry. An uncomfortable silence filled the nursery, broken only by Ethan's soft breathing. Outside, raindrops began to patter against the window, a spring storm rolling in from the Hudson River. I should call Dr. Winters, Maxwell said finally, pulling out his phone. Ethan's pediatrician? Yes, that would be good. Olivia continued, to hold the baby, unwilling to put him down while he was finally peaceful. Maxwell made the call, explaining the situation in clipped, efficient sentences. After hanging up, he turned back to Olivia. She's coming over. She was concerned about his symptoms. Olivia nodded, relief washing over her. Thank you. Maxwell hesitated, then gestured to the nursing chair. You should sit while we wait. This unexpected consideration from her, normally distant employer, surprised Olivia. She sat carefully, adjusting Ethan in her arms. The baby had fallen asleep, his breathing still slightly labored, but more regular than before. How did you know what to do? Maxwell asked, leaning against the changing table, maintaining a careful distance. I was a nursing assistant before everything happened. Olivia kept her eyes on Ethan, avoiding Maxwell's gaze. And then, with my own son, you just learn. Maxwell nodded, his expression softening slightly. Catherine, my wife, she was so prepared. Had all these books, took all the classes. I was always working. I thought there would be time later to learn. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and honest, in a way their previous interactions had never been. The sound of the front door opening downstairs interrupted the moment. Hurried footsteps on the stairs announced Brittany's return. She burst into the nursery, her arms conspicuously empty of any formula or baby supplies, but laden with shopping bags bearing designer logos. Mr. Anderson, I didn't expect you to. She stopped abruptly, taking in the scene. Olivia in the nursing chair holding Ethan while Maxwell stood nearby. Her carefully made-up face contorted in confusion. What's going on? Why is she holding Ethan? Maxwell's expression hardened. Where have you been, Brittany? And where is the formula you went to buy? Brittany's eyes darted between them. The store was out of his usual brand. I was looking for an alternative, but then I got caught in the rain and her excuses died under Maxwell's increasingly skeptical gaze. Ethan has a fever, he said coldly. He was alone, hungry, and uncared for when Olivia found him. Doctor. Winters is on her way. Brittany's face paled beneath her makeup. A fever, but he was fine when I left. I'm sure it's nothing serious. Babies get fevers all the time. She moved toward Olivia, arms outstretched. Here, let me take him. Ethan, disturbed by the loud voice, began to whimper. Olivia instinctively held him closer. No, Maxwell said firmly. Let him be. He's finally resting. Brittany's expression shifted from concern to indignation. Mr. Anderson, it's highly inappropriate for the cleaning lady to be handling your son like this. What would people think? The doorbell rang before Maxwell could respond. That must be Dr. Winters, Olivia said softly, still gently rocking Ethan. I'll get it, Maxwell said, giving Brittany a look that clearly indicated they weren't finished with this conversation. Left alone with Olivia, Brittany's friendly facade dropped completely. What do you think you're doing? She hissed. This isn't your job. This isn't your baby. Olivia met her gaze steadily. Someone needed to take care of him. I take excellent care of Ethan, Brittany snapped. One little shopping trip and you're trying to take over. I've seen how you look at him, you know. It's creepy. Everyone knows about your situation. The cruelty of the comment struck Olivia like a physical blow, but she kept her expression neutral for Ethan's sake. This isn't about me. It's about a baby who needs proper care. Dr. Winters entered the nursery with Maxwell, cutting off any further exchange. The pediatrician was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. Let's have a look at our little patient, she said, approaching Olivia and Ethan. She examined the baby thoroughly while Olivia held him, checking his temperature, ears, throat, and hydration level. He's definitely dehydrated and has an ear infection, Doctor. Winters concluded. The fever is concerning, but not critical yet. He needs antibiotics and careful monitoring. She looked at Olivia. You did the right thing feeding him. He's better hydrated than I would have expected given his condition. Maxwell cleared his throat. So he'll be okay? Dr. Winters nodded. With proper care, yes, I'm prescribing antibiotics and suggesting someone stay with him tonight to monitor his fever. She glanced pointedly at Brittany, who was hovering nearby with a mixture of concern and defensiveness on her face. I'll have the prescription delivered, Maxwell said. As Dr. Winters packed up her medical bag, she pulled Maxwell aside for a private conversation. Olivia couldn't hear everything, but phrases like consistent care and attachment needs drifted across the room. Brittany took the opportunity to approach Olivia again. You can give him to me now, she said, her voice honeyed for the benefit of the doctor still present, but her eyes cold. I'll take it from here. Something in Olivia resisted. The thought of handing Ethan back to the woman who had abandoned him made her physically ill. But what choice did she have? This wasn't her child, this wasn't her home. She was the cleaning woman, nothing more. Before she could decide, Maxwell returned to her side. Dr. Winters thinks it would be best if Ethan remains with whoever he's most comfortable with right now, he said, surprising everyone in the room. Apparently, changing caregivers could stress him further and worsen his condition. But, sir, Brittany began. Olivia, Maxwell continued, ignoring the interruption, would you be willing to stay tonight, to help care for Ethan? I'll compensate you for your time, of course. The request shocked Olivia as much, as it did Brittany, whose mouth hung open in disbelief. Yes, Olivia replied without hesitation. I'd be happy to help. What she didn't say was that the thought of leaving Ethan now when he was sick and vulnerable was unbearable. This is ridiculous, Brittany muttered, but not quite softly enough. Maxwell turned to her, his expression cold. We'll discuss your future employment tomorrow, Brittany. For now, you're dismissed. The nanny's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. She grabbed her designer purse and stalked out, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood floors. Dr. Winters watched the scene with raised eyebrows before turning to Maxwell. I'll check in tomorrow. Call me if his fever goes above 102 or if anything else concerns you. After the doctor left, Maxwell and Olivia were alone with Ethan, the rain outside creating a gentle soundtrack to the strange new reality they found themselves in. Maxwell looked at his son in Olivia's arms, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time since Catherine's funeral. I don't even know how to thank you, he said quietly. Olivia smiled softly. You don't have to. Just be there for him. That's all he really needs. As night fell over Westchester County, the unlikely pair settled in to watch over the sleeping infant, neither fully understanding how this single day had altered the trajectory of all their lives. The next morning brought sunshine streaming through the nursery windows, casting golden rectangles across the plush carpet. Olivia had spent the night in the rocking chair beside Ethan's crib, waking every 2 hours to check his temperature and offer comfort when he fussed. By dawn, his fever had broken, and for the first time since Olivia had worked at the Anderson estate, Ethan greeted the day without tears. Maxwell appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a crisp button-down and slacks, though his eyes betrayed his sleepless night. He had spent hours in his home office, researching ear infections in infants and second-guessing every parenting decision he'd made since Catherine's passing. How is he? Maxwell asked, approaching the crib where Olivia stood watching Ethan, who was awake and quietly studying his own fingers. Much better, Olivia replied. His fever's gone and he took formula twice during the night. Maxwell nodded, a mixture of relief and shame crossing his features. I should have been the one checking on him. You needed rest, Olivia said simply, and I didn't mind. An awkward silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions about what happened next. Olivia was acutely aware that she had crossed professional boundaries that couldn't be uncrossed. Maxwell seemed equally aware that he could no longer pretend his son was being properly cared for under the previous arrangement. I fired Brittany this morning, Maxwell said finally. Over the phone, Probably not my finest leadership moment, but after yesterday, he trailed off, running a hand through his hair. What will you do now? Olivia asked, keeping her voice neutral despite the spark of hope flaring in her chest. Maxwell hesitated. I was hoping you might consider a temporary arrangement until I can find a suitable replacement. Dr. Winters mentioned how responsive Ethan was to you, and given his condition... Olivia looked down at Ethan, who had grabbed hold of her finger and was gripping it with surprising strength. The connection she felt to this child was undeniable, a healing balm on her own raw grief. I'm not trained as a nanny, she said carefully. You were a nursing assistant. You have your own experience as a mother. That's more qualification than Brittany apparently had. Maxwell's tone was bitter. I'll double your current salary, of course. The offer was generous, more than generous for someone in Olivia's financial situation. With her medical bills mounting and rent due on an apartment that held too many painful memories, it was an opportunity she couldn't afford to refuse. All right, she agreed. Temporarily. Relief washed over Maxwell's face. Thank you. I'll have HR send over the paperwork. He glanced at his watch. I have meetings all morning, but I'll be working from home today if you need anything. As he turned to leave, Olivia called after him. Mr. Anderson? He paused in the doorway. He likes to be sung to. I noticed it last night. It doesn't matter what song, just the sound of a voice. Something flickered in Maxwell's eyes. Pain, memory, gratitude, before he nodded and disappeared down the hallway. The new arrangement quickly settled into a rhythm over the following days. Olivia arrived early each morning, caring for Ethan with a tenderness and attention he had clearly been missing. The change in the baby was remarkable. He began to smile, actual social smiles, not the gas-induced grimaces that Maxwell had mistaken for happiness. He started to coo and babble, reaching for toys and faces with increasing coordination. Maxwell, too, began to change. He shortened his workdays, coming home in time to witness Ethan's bath and bedtime routine. At first, he merely observed from the doorway, as if afraid to intrude on the peaceful tableau of Olivia and his son. Gradually, with Olivia's gentle encouragement, he began to participate, awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence. Like this? He asked one evening, attempting to support Ethan's head in the bath. Perfect, Olivia encouraged. See how he trusts you? He knows his daddy. The word daddy hung in the air between them, weighted with significance. Maxwell had been many things in his life. Tech prodigy, startup founder, widower. But daddy was a role he had yet to fully embrace. Until now. As weeks passed, Olivia found herself storing away these moments in her heart. Ethan's first rollover, the way his eyes followed her around the room, his perfect weight in her arms as she fed him. She knew this arrangement was temporary, knew she should guard her heart against another devastating loss, but something about Ethan's innocent need broke through her defenses. The wealthy enclave of Westchester County, however, was a small world with a long memory and a taste for gossip. Brittany, humiliated by her dismissal, had not gone quietly. I heard the Anderson baby is being raised by the cleaning lady now, whispered Amanda Hayes to her friends during their weekly tennis match at the country club. Amanda's husband served on the board of Maxwell's company, giving her gossip an air of authority. Apparently, she lost her own baby and has some kind of obsession with the Anderson child. Maxwell found her breastfeeding his son. The story spread like wildfire through the carefully manicured lawns and marble-countered kitchens of their exclusive community. With each retelling, it grew more salacious, more concerning. By the time it reached the ears of Eleanor Whitmore, Catherine Anderson's mother, the narrative had transformed Olivia from savior to predator. Eleanor hadn't approved of her daughter's marriage to Maxwell, a man she considered beneath their family's social standing despite his financial success. Catherine's death had only hardened her heart against her son-in-law, whom she privately blamed for the tragedy. The news about Ethan provided the perfect opportunity to intervene. Her Mercedes SUV pulled into the Anderson driveway one sunny afternoon as Olivia was sitting on a blanket in the garden with Ethan, showing him the flowers and trees. "May I Help you? Olivia asked, instinctively holding Ethan closer as the elegant older woman approached with a pinched expression. I'm Eleanor Whitmore, she announced, as if the name alone should explain everything. Catherine's mother, Ethan's grandmother. Her gaze swept critically over Olivia and the baby. I understand you're caring for my grandson now. Olivia stood, balancing Ethan on her hip. Yes, Mrs. Whitmore. I'm Olivia Reed, Ethan's nanny. Eleanor's lips thinned. Funny, I thought you were the housekeeper. That's what Maxwell told us when Catherine was still alive. She stepped closer, peering at Ethan as if inspecting him for damage. Is my son-in-law home? We need to talk. He's in his office, Olivia replied, maintaining her composure despite the clear hostility radiating from the older woman. I can show you in. I know the way, Eleanor snapped, brushing past Olivia toward the house. She paused, turning back, with narrowed eyes. I hope you understand that whatever arrangement you think you have here is temporary. Ethan is a Whitmore as much as he is an Anderson. He deserves proper care from someone of appropriate background. The implication stung, but Olivia kept her expression neutral for Ethan's sake. Ethan receives excellent care, Mrs. Whitmore. He's thriving. Eleanor's eyes flashed. We'll see about that. The confrontation inside Maxwell's office was brief, but explosive. Olivia could hear raised voices through the door as she waited in the nursery with Ethan, trying to distract him with toys while straining to catch snippets of the argument. She was wet nursing my grandson Maxwell. Do you have any idea how inappropriate that is? She saved him from serious illness when your recommended nanny abandoned him. There are agencies for this sort of thing, proper agencies with background checks and qualifications. Olivia has been better for Ethan than anyone else in his life, including me. The last statement was followed by silence, then the sound of footsteps storming down the hallway. Eleanor appeared. In the nursery doorway, her face flushed with anger. This isn't over, she said coldly to Olivia before leaving. Maxwell appeared moments later, his expression tight. I apologize for my mother-in-law. It's all right, Olivia said, though they both knew it wasn't. She's concerned about Ethan. She's concerned about appearances, Maxwell corrected bitterly. Always has been. That night, after Ethan was asleep and Olivia was preparing to leave for her apartment, Maxwell asked her to stay for a drink. It was unprecedented. In all her time working for him, they had maintained a strictly professional relationship. But the events of the day had shifted something between them. They sat in the kitchen, Maxwell nursing a scotch while Olivia sipped tea, neither quite looking at the other. Eleanor is on the board of several charities with connections to my investors, Maxwell said finally, and Catherine's father was my first angel investor. Their social circle is influential. Olivia's heart sank. She understood the implication. You're worried about what they'll do. Maxwell swirled the amber liquid in his glass. I'm worried about what's best for Ethan. He looked up, meeting her eyes. And right now, that's you. The admission hung in the air between them, charged with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. People will talk, Olivia said softly. They already are. Let them, Maxwell replied with unexpected fierceness. I've spent too much of my life caring what others think. It cost me my relationship with Catherine while she was alive. I was always working, always networking, always concerned with the next funding round or board meeting. And then she was gone. His voice broke slightly. I won't make the same mistake with Ethan. Olivia nodded, understanding more than she could express. Her own loss had taught her similar lessons about what truly mattered in life. Then we continue as we are, she said simply. But they both knew it wouldn't be that simple. Eleanor's visit was just the beginning. The whispers were growing louder, the pressure mounting. Brittany had found sympathetic ears among the wealthy mothers of Westchester, women who found the idea of a grieving cleaning woman forming an attachment to a baby from their social circle deeply unsettling. The following Sunday, Olivia received a text from her friend who worked as a server at the Westchester Country Club, where many of the area's elite families gathered for brunch after church. They're talking about you, the text read. The Anderson baby's nanny. Someone said you were unstable, that you're trying to replace your dead baby with him. Be careful, Liv. Olivia stared at the message, her hands trembling. The cruelty of the accusation took her breath away. Yes, she loved Ethan. How could she not? But she had never, not for one moment, confused him with her lost son. Her relationship with Ethan was healing precisely because it was different, because it allowed her to channel her maternal love in a way that honored her own child's memory, rather than erased it. What she didn't know was that at that very moment, Maxwell was receiving his own warning. A phone call from his lead investor, expressing concerns about stability in his personal life affecting the company. A casual mention of reconsidering the next funding round. The battle lines were being drawn, and Olivia and Maxwell found themselves on the same side against forces neither fully understood. What had begun as a simple act of compassion, a woman feeding a hungry baby, had evolved into something that threatened the careful social order of their world. And for Ethan, blissfully unaware in his crib, everything hung in the balance. The pressure mounted steadily over the following weeks. At first it came in subtle forms. Invitations to Maxwell's business functions mysteriously lost, playdates for Ethan cancelled at the last minute, sidelong glances at the grocery store when Olivia shopped with Ethan strapped to her chest. But as spring turned to summer in Westchester County, the campaign against Olivia grew more overt. Eleanor Whitmore had mobilized her considerable social resources. As a board member of the prestigious Westchester Children's Foundation and a fixture in local high society, her concerns about her grandson's welfare carried significant weight. She arranged for anonymous calls to Child Protective Services, citing concerns about Ethan's care. Though the social workers who visited found nothing amiss, in fact they remarked on how well-adjusted and healthy Ethan appeared, the visits themselves cast a shadow over the household. Maxwell tried to shield Olivia from the worst of it, but she felt the strain nonetheless. She noticed how he took more calls in private, how his expression tightened whenever Eleanor's name was mentioned, how he began checking his phone obsessively whenever they took Ethan to the park. "It's nothing," he would say when she asked, but the dark circles under his eyes told a different story. The breaking point came on a sweltering July afternoon. Olivia had taken Ethan to the local splash pad, a favorite activity, as he approached 4 months old. He loved the sensation of the water, giggling and kicking his chubby legs whenever the gentle fountains sprayed nearby. Olivia was so absorbed in Ethan's joy that she didn't notice the group of women approaching until they were standing beside her bench. Olivia Reed. The speaker was Diane Foster, head of the Westchester Mothers Association and one of Eleanor's closest friends. She was flanked by 3 other women, all impeccably dressed despite the heat, their expressions a mixture of concern and disdain. Olivia tensed, instinctively drawing Ethan closer. "Yes?" "We're concerned about the Anderson baby," Diane said, her voice carrying just enough to attract the attention of nearby parents. "There are rumors that you're emotionally unstable since your loss, that you formed an unhealthy attachment to this child." The cruelty of the accusation stole Olivia's breath. Around them, other mothers began to gather, sensing drama. "It's perfectly fine," Olivia managed, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "As his nanny, I'm providing appropriate care with his father's full approval." One of the other women stepped forward. Brittany's cousin, Olivia realized with a sinking feeling. "My cousin was the professional nanny until you manipulated your way into her position. Everyone knows what you did, how you took advantage of a vulnerable widower." Whispers rippled through the growing crowd. Olivia felt trapped, exposed. Ethan, sensing her distress, began to fuss. "Please excuse us," Olivia said, standing to leave, but the women blocked her path. "We've contacted Mr. Anderson's in-laws," Diane continued. "They agree that the situation is inappropriate. A child of Ethan's standing should be with a properly trained caregiver, not someone working through her own trauma with someone else's baby." Tears stung Olivia's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You know nothing about me or my relationship with Ethan." "We know enough," Diane replied coldly. "And if Maxwell Anderson won't do what's right for his son, others will intervene." The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. Olivia pushed past them, clutching Ethan to her chest as she hurried to her car. Her hands shook as she buckled him into his car seat. Only when they were both safely inside with the doors locked did she allow herself to break down, silent tears streaming down her face as Ethan watched her with confused eyes. When Maxwell returned home that evening, Olivia was waiting for him in his office, Ethan already asleep upstairs. The confrontation at the splash pad had crystallized something for her, a painful realization that she'd been avoiding for weeks. "We need to talk," she said, as he loosened his tie, her voice hollow. Maxwell's expression immediately darkened. What happened? She told him everything. The women's accusations, the crowd of onlookers, the thinly veiled threats. With each detail, Maxwell's face grew more thunderous. "I'll handle this," he said when she finished. "I'll call Eleanor, make it clear that she needs to back off. I'll speak to my lawyers about harassment." "Maxwell," Olivia interrupted gently. It was the first time she had used his first name. "This isn't about legal action or threats. This is about Ethan." "Exactly. They have no right to interfere with his care." "They're interfering because of me," Olivia said, the words painful to speak aloud. "Because I don't fit their idea of who should be raising him, and they won't stop. They'll keep calling CPS, keep spreading rumors, keep creating scenes when I take him out. What kind of environment is that for him to grow up in?" Maxwell stared at her, comprehension slowly dawning. "You're not suggesting—" "I think it's time to find a replacement," she said, each word a knife in her heart. "Someone with impeccable credentials that even Eleanor can't object to. Someone who won't make Ethan the subject of gossip and scrutiny." "No." Maxwell's response was immediate and firm. "Absolutely not. You're the best thing that's happened to Ethan, to both of us, since Catherine died. I won't let them drive you away." Olivia shook her head sadly. "It's not about what we want anymore. It's about what's best for Ethan. He deserves peace, stability, not to be at the center of some social war. So we just give in? Let them dictate our lives with their prejudice and small-mindedness?" Maxwell's voice rose in frustration. "Sometimes the hardest choice is the right one," Olivia said quietly. "I love Ethan too much to let my presence hurt him." The admission hung in the air between them. Love. It was the first time either had spoken the word in relation to their unusual situation. Maxwell crossed the room in 3 long strides, taking her hands in his. "Then we'll leave. I can relocate the company headquarters to Boston or Chicago, start fresh somewhere without Eleanor's influence." The offer stunned Olivia. "You would uproot your entire life? For Ethan? For you?" "Yes." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "These past months, watching you with him, I've realized what I've been doing wrong all along. I've been living for appearances, for expectations, for what other people thought I should be. Catherine saw it. It was the source of most of our arguments. She wanted me to stand up for myself, for what I truly wanted." His voice softened. "I think she would have liked you, Olivia. Your courage, your honesty." For a moment, Olivia allowed herself to imagine it, a fresh start, away from the painful memories of her apartment, away from Eleanor's machinations and Westchester's judgment. But reality intruded on the fantasy. "Your company is here. Catherine's. Memory is here, your whole support system." "What support system?" Maxwell laughed bitterly. "The same people who are trying to drive you away, who care more about social propriety than my son's happiness. That's not support, Olivia. That's control." His phone rang, interrupting the moment. Maxwell glanced at the screen and grimaced. "It's my lead investor. I need to take this." Olivia nodded, stepping back. "I should go check on Ethan anyway." As she left the office, she heard Maxwell's voice shift into business mode, discussing quarterly projections and market strategies as if his personal life wasn't unraveling. The contrast struck her, his ability to compartmentalize, to present one face to the world while harboring another privately. It was a skill she had never mastered, her emotions always too close to the surface, too honest. Upstairs, Ethan slept peacefully in his crib, unaware of the adult complexities swirling around him. Olivia watched him breathe, memorizing the curve of his cheek, the fan of his eyelashes, the perfect tiny fingernails. The thought of leaving him created a physical ache in her chest. "I'll always love you," she whispered, stroking his soft hair, "no matter what happens." The decision crystallized in her mind as she watched him sleep. Maxwell's suggestion of leaving was impulsive, unrealistic. His company was here, his investors were here, Catherine's family and memory were here. Ethan deserved to know his maternal grandparents, despite Eleanor's current behavior. A clean break would be better for everyone, painful but necessary, like setting a broken bone. When Maxwell found her an hour later, still standing by Ethan's crib, her resolve was set. "I've made my decision," she said quietly. "I'll stay until you find a suitable replacement, but then I need to go, a clean break." She swallowed hard. "It's the right thing for Ethan." Maxwell's expression hardened. "I don't accept that." "It's not your choice to make," Olivia replied gently. "I'm giving my notice, effective as soon as you find someone new." The pain in Maxwell's eyes matched her own, but she held firm. This wasn't about their feelings. It was about Ethan's future, his stability, his place in the world he'd been born into. What Olivia didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Eleanor Whitmore had already set more decisive action in motion. The confrontation at the splash pad had been merely a prelude. While Olivia and Maxwell were having their painful conversation, Eleanor was meeting with her longtime friend, Judge Patricia Harrington, discussing her concerns about her grandson's welfare in heart-wrenching, carefully exaggerated detail. The next morning, as Olivia arrived at the Anderson estate, she was met by Maxwell at the door, his face ashen. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, her heart racing. "Eleanor has filed for emergency custody of Ethan," he said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "She's claiming I'm an unfit father due to poor judgment in childcare decisions and emotional instability following Catherine's death. There's a hearing scheduled for next week." Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. "This is my fault." "No," Maxwell said firmly. "This is Eleanor using Ethan as a weapon, just like she tried to use Catherine when she was alive. This ends now." His phone buzzed with an incoming text. Maxwell glanced at it and his expression turned to stone. "What is it?" Olivia asked. "My lead investor is pulling out. Concerns about stability in leadership." The bitterness in his voice was palpable. Eleanor's work, no doubt. Olivia's stomach twisted with guilt. Everything was unraveling because of her presence in their lives. "Maxwell, I should go. Now. Before things get worse." "If you leave now, Eleanor wins," Maxwell replied. "And Ethan loses the one person who's truly been there for him since Catherine died." He took her hands in his. "I'm asking you to stay and fight with me, not just for Ethan, but for what's right. For the truth." The intensity in his eyes made her hesitate. Could they really win against someone with Eleanor's connections and resources? Was staying to fight worth the risk of making things worse for Ethan? Before she could respond, Maxwell's housekeeper appeared in the doorway, her expression uncomfortable. "Mr. Anderson, there are people at the gate. They say they're from the court. Something about papers that need to be served." Maxwell's grip on Olivia's hands tightened. "Stay with Ethan," he said quietly. "No matter what happens next, he needs you." As Maxwell went to deal with the court officials, Olivia climbed the stairs to the nursery, where Ethan was just waking from his morning nap. His face lit up when he saw her, arms reaching, legs kicking in excitement. "Hey, sunshine," she whispered, lifting him into her arms, breathing in his sweet baby scent. "Everything's going to be okay." But as she held him close, listening to the muffled sounds of official voices downstairs, Olivia wasn't sure she believed her own words. The forces aligned against them were powerful, determined, and playing by rules she didn't understand. All she knew with certainty was that leaving Ethan now when he needed stability most was impossible. Whatever storm was coming, they would weather it together. The court documents were worse than Maxwell had feared. Eleanor wasn't merely seeking visitation rights or shared custody. She wanted full legal guardianship of Ethan, with Maxwell reduced to supervised visitation. Her petition painted a damning picture, a grieving widower who had abdicated his parental responsibilities to an emotionally unstable house cleaner with no childcare credentials, a man so consumed by his business that he failed to notice his infant son was being inappropriately cared for by a woman attempting to replace her deceased child. Maxwell's attorney, Rachel Goldstein, didn't sugarcoat the situation when she arrived at the estate later that afternoon. Eleanor has significant influence with family court Judge Harrington, she explained, spreading documents across Maxwell's desk. And she's gathered affidavits from several concerned community members attesting to your alleged neglect and Ms. Reed's inappropriate attachment to Ethan. This is absurd, Maxwell growled. Olivia saved Ethan when he was sick and abandoned. She's been nothing but professional and caring. Rachel's expression was sympathetic but pragmatic. Unfortunately, perception matters in family court. The narrative Eleanor is creating, a grieving woman overstepping boundaries with someone else's child, a distracted father making poor caregiving choices, is compelling, especially given your admitted focus on work following Catherine's death. Olivia, who had been sitting quietly with Ethan on her lap, spoke up. What if I leave? Would that help Maxwell's case? Rachel considered this. It might appear as though Maxwell recognized an inappropriate situation and corrected it, but it could also be seen as admission that there was a problem. There has to be a way to fight this, Maxwell insisted, pacing the office. I'm Ethan's father. I make decisions based on his welfare, not social appearances. We'll fight, Rachel assured him, but you need to understand what you're up against. Eleanor has resources, connections, and the sympathy factor of a grandmother, concerned for her daughter's only child. The strategy they developed was two-pronged, legal and social. On the legal front, Rachel would gather evidence of Ethan's excellent care and development under Olivia's watch, pediatrician statements, developmental milestones, daily logs of his activities and health. On the social front, Maxwell would need to demonstrate his commitment to fatherhood by becoming more visibly involved in Ethan's life and care. And Olivia, Rachel added carefully, you'll need to maintain absolute professionalism. No more breastfeeding, obviously. Document everything. Never be alone with Ethan if possible. Always have a witness to your interactions. The instructions felt like a knife to Olivia's heart. The natural, loving connection she had formed with Ethan was being reduced to clinical documentation and supervised interactions. The hearing was scheduled for the following week, leaving them precious little time to prepare. In those 7 days, the Anderson household transformed. Maxwell cancelled all non-essential meetings, working from home and participating actively in Ethan's care. He hired a professional photographer to document their father-son activities, creating a visual record of his parental involvement. Olivia maintained her role, but with Rachel's cautions ringing in her ears. She documented every diaper change, every feeding, every nap, in meticulous detail. She was careful never to use terms of endearment when others might overhear, never to hold Ethan longer than necessary for his care. The emotional distance was agonizing, but she reminded herself it was temporary, a necessary performance to secure Ethan's future with his father. What they hadn't anticipated was Brittany's next move. The fired nanny, still smarting from her dismissal and encouraged by Eleanor's support, gave an exclusive interview to the Westchester County Chronicle, the region's most widely read newspaper. The headline was devastating. Baby Anderson's caregiver speaks out. I fear for his safety. The article painted Olivia as a mentally unstable woman who had manipulated her way into the Anderson household, exploiting Maxwell's grief and distraction. Brittany claimed she had been fired for expressing concerns about Olivia's obsessive behavior toward Ethan. She would stare at him for hours, Brittany was quoted saying. She told me she still produced milk after losing her own baby and wanted to nurse Ethan. I told Mr. Anderson it was inappropriate, and the next day I was fired. I'm speaking out now because I'm worried about that sweet little boy. The story exploded across Westchester County, reaching Maxwell's investors, business associates, and the very court officials who would soon decide Ethan's fate. Rachel called an emergency meeting. "This complicates things," she said grimly. Showing them the article. "The court will definitely see this, and it supports Eleanor's narrative perfectly." Olivia felt physically ill reading Brittany's fabricated account. None of this is true. She left Ethan alone for hours. He was dehydrated, feverish. "I know," Maxwell said, his voice tight with anger, "and we'll set the record straight." He turned to Rachel. "Can we sue for defamation?" "Eventually, yes, but right now we need to focus on the custody case." Rachel hesitated. "There's another option we should consider. It's not ideal, but given the circumstances, Maxwell, you could agree to Eleanor's demands for increased visitation and supervision, with the condition that you retain primary custody." "Absolutely not," Maxwell replied without hesitation. "I won't legitimize her tactics by compromising. Even if it means possibly losing Ethan altogether." Rachel's question hung in the air. Maxwell's resolve wavered visibly. There has to be another way. Olivia had been quiet, thinking, what if there was a way to prove Brittany is lying, to show that she abandoned Ethan that day? "How?" Rachel asked. "The security cameras," Olivia realized. Maxwell has cameras at all the entrances. They would show when Brittany left and when she returned. Maxwell's expression brightened. "She said she was going for formula, but she came back with shopping bags from designer stores. The timestamp would prove she was gone for hours." "That's helpful," Rachel nodded. "What about the condition Ethan was in? Do we have any documentation of his state when Olivia found him?" Maxwell and Olivia exchanged looks. "Dr. Winters," they said simultaneously. "The pediatrician who examined him that night," Maxwell explained to Rachel. "She noted his dehydration, the ear infection, everything, and she witnessed Brittany's behavior when she returned." "Get me Dr. Winters' contact information immediately," Rachel said, her professional demeanor energized by this new avenue of defense. "And the security footage. We need to build a counter-narrative before the hearing." As Rachel left to prepare their case, Maxwell and Olivia were left alone in the living room, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. Ethan had fallen, asleep in his swing, peaceful and unaware of the battle being waged over his future. "I'm sorry," Olivia said softly. "For all of this?" Maxwell looked at her with surprise. "You have nothing to apologize for. You saved my son when everyone else, including me, failed him. But now you might lose him because of me." "If I lose him, it won't be because of you," Maxwell said firmly. "It will be because his grandmother is manipulating the system, because I was too absorbed in my work to be the father he needed, because this community values appearances over truth." He moved closer, taking her hand. "You're the only person in this whole mess who has consistently put Ethan first, without any agenda or ego involved." The simple truth of his statement hung between them. In the midst of legal maneuvers and social posturing, Ethan's actual needs had become almost secondary to everyone except Olivia. "Whatever happens," Maxwell continued, "I want you to know that meeting you, seeing how you care for Ethan, how you've helped me learn to be a father, it's changed me, for the better." The intensity in his eyes made Olivia's breath catch. There was something new there, something beyond gratitude or professional respect, something she wasn't ready to name. "We should focus on the hearing," she said, gently withdrawing her hand, "one day at a time." The day of the hearing dawned clear and hot, a typical August morning in Westchester. Olivia dressed carefully in the most professional outfit she owned, a navy blue dress she'd worn to job interviews, now slightly loose on her frame after weeks of stress and worry. Maxwell wore a conservative suit, his expression grave as they drove to the courthouse in White Plains. Eleanor was already there, resplendent in Chanel, surrounded by supporters including Brittany and several women from the country club. The contrast between the two sides was stark. Eleanor's social army versus Maxwell, Olivia and Rachel standing alone. Judge Patricia Harrington, a stern woman in her 60s with sharp eyes behind designer glasses, called the emergency hearing to order. Eleanor's attorney presented first, weaving a compelling narrative of a grandmother's concern for her vulnerable grandson, highlighting Maxwell's work absences and the inappropriate care arrangement with Olivia. When it was Rachel's turn, she methodically dismantled their case. She presented the security footage, showing Brittany's extended absence and return with shopping bags, not formula. Dr. Winters testified via video call about Ethan's condition that night and the excellent care he had received since under Olivia's watch. Ms. Reed acted to save this child from medical distress, Dr. Winters stated firmly. As a pediatrician with 30 years of experience, I can state unequivocally that her intervention prevented a possible hospitalization. Furthermore, Ethan's development has accelerated remarkably under her care. He's meeting milestones early and shows secure attachment behaviors that are crucial for healthy emotional development. Judge Harrington listened attentively, her expression inscrutable. When both sides had presented their cases, she called for a brief recess to consider her ruling. In the courthouse hallway, Maxwell, Olivia, and Rachel huddled together, too tense for small talk. Across the marble expanse, Eleanor held court with her supporters, her voice carrying just enough for occasional phrases to reach them. Simply inappropriate and poor judgment, featuring prominently. Whatever happens, Maxwell said quietly to Olivia, we know the truth. Judge Harrington's decision, when it came, was unexpected. She denied Eleanor's petition for full guardianship, but ordered a professional evaluation of Ethan's home environment and care arrangements. Until that evaluation was complete, she appointed a court guardian ad litem to make weekly visits and assessments. This court takes allegations of inappropriate care very seriously, Judge Harrington stated. However, we also recognize the primary rights of a biological parent. Mr. Anderson will retain custody pending the evaluation results, but Ms. Reed's interactions with the child will be supervised by the guardian during her work hours. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a defeat either. Eleanor looked furious at being denied immediate custody, while Rachel seemed cautiously optimistic. We can work with this, she told them as they left the courthouse. The guardian will see that Ethan is thriving. Just maintain the documentation and follow all protocols. The first visit from the court-appointed guardian, a no-nonsense social worker named Marian Diaz, was scheduled for the following day. Olivia spent the night in her small apartment for the first time in weeks, the space feeling emptier than ever, without Ethan's presence. She barely slept, worrying about how the evaluation would go, how Ethan would react to her suddenly different behavior toward him. When she arrived at the Anderson estate the next morning, Marian was already there, interviewing Maxwell in his office. Olivia waited anxiously in the kitchen until she was called in for her own interview. Marian's questions were direct and probing, about her background, her loss, her relationship with Ethan, her professional experience. Olivia answered truthfully but carefully, aware that every word would be analyzed and judged. I understand you breastfed the child, Marian said, her tone neutral but her gaze sharp. Can you explain the circumstances? Olivia recounted the events of that first day, Ethan's condition, Brittany's absence, her decision to feed him. It wasn't planned, she concluded. It was an emergency situation, and I made a judgment call based on his immediate needs. Marian made notes without comment. And your own child? I understand your loss was recent. The question pierced Olivia's carefully maintained composure. My son was born with a congenital heart defect. He lived for 3 days. The stark facts couldn't convey the depth of her grief, the way it had hollowed her out and reshaped her. That must have been extremely difficult, Marian said, a hint of genuine sympathy breaking through her professional demeanor. How do you separate those feelings from your care of Ethan? It was the question at the heart of Eleanor's accusations, the one Olivia had asked herself countless times. I don't try to replace my son with Ethan, she said carefully. I honor my baby by using what I learned from loving him to give Ethan the best care possible. They're different children with different needs, different personalities. I'm very clear about that. Marian seemed to consider this, making more notes before moving on to questions about Ethan's daily routine, his development, his relationship with Maxwell. After the interviews came the observation period. Marian watched as Olivia cared for Ethan throughout the day, feeding him, changing him, engaging him with toys and books. The social worker's presence made Olivia hyper-aware of every interaction, every word, every touch. She found herself second-guessing instinctive responses, wondering if picking Ethan up too quickly when he fussed would be seen as obsessive, or if letting him cry for a moment would be interpreted as neglectful. Maxwell, too, seemed constrained by the observation, his natural awkwardness with certain aspects of childcare magnified under scrutiny. Only Ethan remained unchanged, babbling happily and reaching for Olivia with complete trust whenever she came near. At the end of the day, Marion gave them no indication of her assessment. "I'll be back twice a week for the next month," she said, simply. "Please continue your normal routines as much as possible." After she left, Maxwell and Olivia collapsed onto the living room sofa, emotionally drained. "This is insane," Maxwell said, rubbing his temples. "Being evaluated on how we care for my own son, as if we're criminals." "We'll get through it," Olivia replied, though her own confidence was wavering. The constant scrutiny, the legal pressure, the public gossip, it was taking a toll on both of them. And somewhere in the background, Eleanor continued her campaign, undeterred by the partial setback in court. What neither of them knew was that Brittany had been harboring a more dangerous secret, one that would soon explode into their already chaotic lives and change everything. Marion Diaz's twice-weekly visits became the new rhythm of life at the Anderson estate as August melted into September. Under her watchful eye, a strange choreography developed, Maxwell working from home more often, visibly engaged in Ethan's care, Olivia maintaining professional distance while still meeting Ethan's needs, Ethan himself growing, changing, reaching new milestones seemingly unaffected by the tension surrounding him. On the surface, things appeared to be stabilizing. But beneath this fragile peace, pressure continued to build. Maxwell's company was suffering from the withdrawal of his lead investor, forcing him to seek new funding sources while simultaneously fighting for his son. The strain showed in the tightness around his eyes. The late nights Olivia could see him working from the soft glow of his office light as she drove away each evening. For Olivia, the emotional toll was becoming unbearable. Caring for Ethan while maintaining the court-mandated distance felt like constantly denying her own instincts. When he reached for her with complete trust in his eyes, she had to check her natural response to cuddle him close. When he babbled, "Mama," for the first time, a developmental sound rather than an actual word, she had to pretend it didn't pierce her heart. Each night in her empty apartment, she questioned how long she could continue this balancing act. The only thing keeping her there was the knowledge that leaving would make things worse for Ethan and Maxwell, giving Eleanor exactly the ammunition she needed. Eleanor herself had maintained a strategic distance since the hearing, but her influence was evident in the continued social isolation Maxwell faced. Business associates suddenly had conflicts for previously scheduled meetings. Invitations to important networking events mysteriously stopped arriving. Maxwell put on a brave face, but Olivia could see the toll it was taking, not just professionally but personally. Catherine's family had been his only real connection to Westchester society after her death. Now, he was truly alone. The revelation came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, 4 weeks into their court-supervised arrangement. Marion had just completed her observation for the day and was preparing to leave when Maxwell's phone rang. He excused himself to take the call in his office, leaving Olivia and Marion with Ethan in the living room. "He's thriving," Marion commented, watching as Ethan practiced rolling from back to stomach on his playmat. "His motor skills are advanced for his age." It was the first direct feedback she had offered in all her visits, and Olivia felt a surge of pride. "He's been working on that role for days. He's very determined." Marion smiled slightly. "Like his father, and like you, I suspect." The comment, delivered without judgment, caught Olivia off guard. Before she could respond, Maxwell returned to the room, his face ashen. "What's wrong?" Olivia asked, immediately alert to his distress. Maxwell hesitated, glancing at Marion. "That was my housekeeper. She was cleaning Brittany's old room and found something hidden in the back of the closet." He took a deep breath. "Prescription medications. Ethan's medications from when he had the ear infection, the ones that supposedly ran out so quickly." Olivia's blood ran cold. "What?" "There's more," Maxwell continued, his voice tight with controlled rage. She also found receipts from pharmaceutical resale websites. It looks like Brittany was selling his medication online. The implications hit Olivia like a physical blow. Ethan's prolonged illness, his difficulty recovering, the way he'd seemed to improve when she took over his care, it hadn't just been neglect, it had been active harm. Marion's professional demeanor shifted instantly. "Mr. Anderson, I need to see these items immediately. This is a serious allegation that could constitute child endangerment." Maxwell led them to the staff quarters where his housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, waited anxiously. On the bed lay an array of prescription bottles, antibiotics, pain relievers, all with Ethan's name on the labels. Beside them were printed receipts showing online transactions, usernames, shipping addresses. Marion photographed everything with her phone, her expression grave. "I need to report this to the court and to the police. Selling prescription medications is a federal offense, and the fact that these were taken from a child in her care makes it even more serious. Will this affect the custody evaluation?" Maxwell asked, his voice strained. "It changes the entire context," Marion replied. "If these allegations are substantiated and the evidence appears quite clear, it would significantly undermine the credibility of Ms. Taylor's testimony against Ms. Reed." She turned to Olivia. "You were the one who noticed the baby's continued illness, correct?" Olivia nodded. "He wasn't improving as he should have been on the antibiotics. I mentioned it to Maxwell, and we took him back to Dr. Winters, who prescribed a different medication. The memory of Ethan's discomfort, his fever that wouldn't break, filled her with renewed anger. Brittany was supposed to be administering the medicine, and instead she was selling it," Maxwell finished, his voice hollow with disbelief. "While my son suffered." Marion's professional mask slipped further, revealing genuine concern. "I'll need statements from both of you, and from Dr. Winters. The court needs to be made aware immediately that a key witness against you was potentially endangering the child herself." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of police statements, phone calls with Rachel, and a hastily scheduled emergency hearing. Brittany, confronted with the evidence, broke down and confessed to selling the medications for extra income. She also admitted, under questioning, that Eleanor had offered her financial incentives to testify against Olivia and Maxwell. "Mrs. Whitmore said if I helped her get custody of Ethan, she'd set me up with a position at the Westchester Children's Foundation," Brittany told the detective, her carefully cultivated image crumbling as she faced the consequences of her actions. "She said no one would believe the cleaning lady over me, that it would be easy." The revelation sent shockwaves through the case. Judge Harrington, visibly disturbed by this turn of events, immediately dismissed Brittany's previous testimony and ordered an investigation into Eleanor's actions. The custody evaluation was temporarily suspended pending the results. "The court is deeply troubled by these developments," Judge Harrington stated. "The welfare of the child is our paramount concern, and it appears he has been well served by Ms. Reed's intervention, not endangered by it as previously alleged." For the first time in weeks, Olivia allowed herself to hope. As they left the courthouse, Maxwell impulsively hugged her, lifting her off her feet in a rare display of emotion. "We're turning the corner," he said, his voice thick with relief. "They finally see the truth." Olivia wanted to believe him, but years of hard lessons had taught her caution. "Eleanor won't give up easily," she warned. "This is a setback for her, but she still has resources, connections." Maxwell's face hardened with resolve. "Let her try. I'm done being intimidated, done worrying about what Westchester society thinks. My priority is Ethan, and you." The "and you" lingered between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. Over these difficult weeks, their relationship had evolved, beyond employer and employee, beyond even friends united by care for a child. There was something deeper growing, something neither had been ready to acknowledge amidst the chaos of the custody battle. That evening, with Marion's supervision temporarily suspended and Brittany's accusations discredited, the atmosphere in the Anderson home changed. For the first time in weeks, Olivia felt free to care for Ethan naturally, without constantly monitoring her every touch and word. The relief was palpable as she gave him his bath, sang to him as she had in the early days, held him close as he drifted to sleep. Maxwell watched from the nursery doorway, his expression soft in the glow of the nightlight. "He's missed this," he said quietly. "We both have." Later, after Ethan was asleep, they sat on the terrace overlooking the darkened garden, sharing a bottle of wine and the first moment of peace they'd experienced in months. "What happens now?" Olivia asked, voicing the question that had been hovering between them. Maxwell considered for a moment. "Legally, I think we're in a much stronger position. Rachel believes the court will dismiss Eleanor's petition entirely given Brittany's confession and the evidence of manipulation." "That's not what I meant," Olivia said softly. Maxwell met her gaze, understanding the real question. "Now we decide what kind of family Ethan needs, what kind of life we want to build for him." He hesitated, then reached for her hand. I want what I think he needs is you. Not as his nanny, but as a permanent part of his life, of our lives." The words hung in the night air, fragile and momentous. Olivia's heart raced. "Maxwell, The harsh ring of the doorbell cut through the moment. Maxwell frowned. "It's almost 10. Who would be—" Mrs. Chen appeared at the terrace door, her expression worried. "Mr. Anderson, it's the police and a social worker. They say it's urgent." Cold fear gripped Olivia. They followed Mrs. Chen to the foyer, where 2 officers and a woman in a business suit waited. "Maxwell Anderson?" one officer asked. "We have a report of an endangered child at this address." "What? That's absurd," Maxwell replied, bewildered. "My son is fine, he's sleeping upstairs." The social worker stepped forward. "Mr. Anderson, we've received an anonymous report that Ms. Reed has been giving your son unprescribed medications to make him appear ill when other caregivers are present, but responsive to her care. We need to check on the child immediately." The accusation was so outlandish, so precisely calculated to play on their recent discovery about Brittany, that it momentarily left them speechless. Olivia felt the room tilt around her as the implication sank in. "That's completely false," Maxwell finally managed. "Olivia would never harm Ethan. We just discovered his former nanny was the one withholding medication." "We're aware of that situation, sir," the officer replied. "But this is a separate allegation that requires investigation. We need to see the child and search the premises." "This is Eleanor," Olivia whispered to Maxwell. "She's trying a different angle." Maxwell's jaw tightened. "You can see my son, but he's sleeping, and I want my attorney present for any search." The social worker insisted on checking Ethan immediately, following them upstairs to the nursery where he slept peacefully, in his crib. She examined him briefly, confirming he showed no signs of distress or mistreatment. The tension in the room eased slightly at this obvious evidence, contradicting the anonymous report. But the officers still needed to conduct their search, and despite Maxwell's protests, they were authorized to proceed. Olivia watched in horror as they systematically went through the nursery, checking cabinets and drawers. "What exactly are you looking for?" Maxwell demanded, keeping his voice low to avoid waking Ethan. "Any medications not prescribed to the child, anything that could be used to induce symptoms," the social worker replied. The search of the nursery yielded nothing suspicious, as they knew it would. But when the officers moved to Olivia's daybag, sitting on a chair in the corner, she felt a flicker of unease. She kept nothing in there but personal items, her wallet, keys, a change of clothes for herself in case of baby messes, her own prescription allergy medication. "What's this?" the female officer asked, holding up a small, unmarked pill bottle from the bottom of Olivia's bag. She opened it, revealing several white tablets. Olivia stared in confusion. "That's not mine. I've never seen that before." The officer used a gloved hand to extract one of the pills. "We'll need to have this tested." "This is ridiculous," Maxwell interjected. "Anyone could have planted that. Olivia would never." "Sir, we need Ms. Reed to come with us to answer some questions," the male officer stated firmly. "This is now an active investigation." The world seemed to slow around Olivia as the implications became clear. She was being framed, expertly and deliberately, by someone who knew exactly how to manipulate the system. Someone like Eleanor Whitmore, with her connections to judges, social services, and the police department where she served on the Citizen Advisory Board. "Maxwell," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Call Rachel. Now. Tell her what's happening." As the officers led Olivia downstairs, she caught a glimpse of movement outside the front windows. A car parked across the street, its interior light briefly illuminating a familiar face before going dark. Eleanor Whitmore watching her plan unfold. In that moment, Olivia understood with perfect clarity what was happening. This wasn't just about custody anymore. This was about completely discrediting her, making her not just an inappropriate caregiver, but a criminal. If Eleanor succeeded, Olivia wouldn't just lose Ethan. She would lose everything: her reputation, her freedom, her future. And Eleanor would win Ethan by default, as Maxwell struggled to clear Olivia's name while simultaneously caring for a baby and running his company. It was a perfect trap, meticulously planned and executed. As the police car pulled away from the Anderson estate, Olivia watched Maxwell standing in the doorway, his expression a mixture of rage and helplessness. She tried to memorize his face and thought of Ethan sleeping peacefully upstairs, unaware that his world was once again being torn apart by the adults who claimed to love him. The rain that had threatened all day finally began to fall. Drops, streaking down the car window, blurring the receding image of the only home where Olivia had felt whole since losing her son. She closed her eyes, gathering her strength for the fight ahead. Eleanor had underestimated her once before. When she'd found Ethan abandoned and ill, she would underestimate her again. Because unlike Eleanor, Olivia wasn't fighting for control, or appearances, or social standing. She was fighting for love, the purest, most powerful motivation of all. The interrogation room at the White Plains Police Department was deliberately intimidating. Stark white walls, a metal table bolted to, the floor, uncomfortable chairs, and a large mirrored window where Olivia knew others were watching. She sat with her back straight, hands folded in her lap, projecting a calm she didn't feel as the detective across from her reviewed her statement for the third time. "Let me understand," Detective Simmons said, his tone skeptical. "You believe Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, a respected community leader and board member of multiple children's charities, planted prescription drugs in your bag to frame you for child endangerment?" "Yes," Olivia replied steadily. "She's been trying to gain custody of her grandson by discrediting both his father and me. When her first attempt failed, she escalated." The detective's expression made it clear how implausible he found this. "Explanation. And do you have any evidence of this alleged conspiracy?" Before Olivia could respond, the door opened and a sharp-featured woman in an impeccable suit entered. "My client won't be answering any more questions without me present," she announced. "I'm Zoe Mitchell, Ms. Reed's attorney." Relief washed over Olivia. Rachel must have called Zoe immediately after Maxwell contacted her. Detective Simmons frowned. "We're in the middle of an interrogation without proper counsel present," Zoe interrupted. "I'd like a moment alone with my client." Once the Sayu detective reluctantly left, Zoe sat across from Olivia. "Rachel briefed me. This is clearly a setup, but we need to be strategic. The pills were anti-anxiety medication commonly prescribed to new mothers with postpartum depression. Given your history, they're trying to paint you as mentally unstable and medicating Ethan to keep him dependent on you." The calculated cruelty of the accusation made Olivia's stomach turn. "That's monstrous." "It is," Zoe agreed grimly. "But it's also clever. They're exploiting your loss and maternal instincts to create a Munchausen by proxy narrative. What can we do? First, we establish your credibility, character witnesses, your employment history, your own medical records showing you've never been prescribed these medications. Second, we investigate who had access to your bag in the Anderson home. And third," Zoe's eyes narrowed, "we go after Eleanor directly. If she orchestrated this, there's a trail, phone calls, meetings, money, changing hands." Meanwhile, Maxwell was facing his own battle. With Olivia held for questioning, Eleanor had immediately filed an emergency motion claiming that the current situation constituted a crisis requiring temporary custody intervention. She's using the chaos she created to her advantage, Rachel explained as they rushed to the courthouse. Judge Harrington is on vacation this week. The judge assigned to emergency motions is Francis Webb, Eleanor's tennis partner and former law school classmate. Maxwell's face darkened. So we've already lost? Not necessarily. Webb has a reputation to protect. If we can present evidence that the allegations against Olivia are fabricated, he'll have to consider it or risk appearing compromised. Eleanor was already in the courtroom when they arrived, wearing an appropriately somber navy blue suit, her expression a perfect mixture of concern and resolve. Beside her sat her attorney, Thomas Blackwood, known for his aggressive tactics in family court. Judge Webb, a silver-haired man with piercing blue eyes, called the emergency hearing to order. Blackwood presented Eleanor's case first, a concerned grandmother stepping in during a crisis to provide stability for her grandson, while his father's judgment was once again called into question. Mr. Anderson employed a woman who is now under investigation for potentially endangering his infant son, Blackwood emphasized. This follows a pattern of poor caregiving choices that put the child at risk. Mrs. Whitmore offers a stable, loving environment with no such concerns. When Rachel rose for Maxwell's response, she took a calculated risk. Your Honor, before addressing Mrs. Whitmore's motion, we would like to present evidence that the current crisis was manufactured by the petitioner herself to manipulate this court. Eleanor's composure slipped momentarily, a flash of alarm crossing her features before she recovered. Judge Webb frowned. That's a serious accusation, Counselor. With serious evidence to support it, Rachel replied, producing a tablet. We have security footage from the Anderson estate showing Mrs. Whitmore's personal assistant entering the property yesterday afternoon when both Mr. Anderson and Ms. Reed were at a pediatrician appointment with the child. The housekeeper admitted her believing she was delivering documents from Mrs. Whitmore. She played the video, which clearly showed a young woman being admitted to the house by Mrs. Chen. The assistant had approximately 15 minutes alone before the housekeeper returned to the foyer. During this time, she had access to Ms. Reed's personal belongings in the nursery. Judge Webb's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened with interest. Do you have evidence that this assistant tampered with Ms. Reed's possessions? We have something more compelling, Your Honor, Rachel continued. We have evidence that Mrs. Whitmore contacted the police and child services before the pills were even discovered. She produced phone records showing calls from Eleanor's personal line to the police department's non-emergency number and to the direct line of a senior social services administrator, both time-stamped hours before the police arrived at the Anderson home. Eleanor leaned forward to whisper urgently to her attorney, her carefully constructed facade beginning to crack. Judge Webb studied the records, his frown deepening. Mr. Blackwood, would your client care to explain these communications? Before Blackwood could formulate a response, the courtroom doors opened and Zoe Mitchell entered with Olivia beside her. Your Honor, if I may, Zoe called out, I represent Olivia Reed, and I have information directly relevant to these proceedings. Webb, clearly intrigued by the unfolding drama, nodded permission. Proceed. The police have released Ms. Reed without charges, Zoe announced. Preliminary testing showed the pills in her bag were indeed prescription anti-anxiety medication, but fingerprint analysis revealed only one set of prints on the bottle, belonging to Vanessa Wright, Mrs. Whitmore's personal assistant. The same assistant seen in the security footage entering the Anderson home. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Eleanor's face had gone pale. Furthermore, Zoe continued, Ms. Wright has provided a sworn statement that she was instructed by Mrs. Whitmore to place the medication in Ms. Reed's bag and then make an anonymous call to authorities. She has agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation in exchange for consideration regarding potential charges. Judge Webb's expression had transformed from professional neutrality to barely contained anger. Mrs. Whitmore, these allegations suggest you have attempted to perpetrate a fraud upon this court and potentially commit several criminal acts in the process. Eleanor's composure finally shattered. "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "That woman has no right. To my daughter's child, she's nobody. A cleaning woman trying to replace her dead baby with my grandson. Catherine would be horrified to see her son being raised by the help." The naked prejudice and cruelty in her words echoed through the suddenly silent courtroom. Maxwell rose halfway from his seat, rage clear on his face, but Rachel's hand on his arm restrained him. Judge Webb's voice was ice cold. "Mrs. Whitmore, I am dismissing your emergency motion with prejudice. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges, including filing false reports, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice." He turned to Maxwell. "Mr. Anderson, you have my sincere apologies for what your family has been subjected to. Your son will remain in your custody, and the court-ordered supervision is hereby terminated, effective immediately." The gavel's sharp crack marked the end of Eleanor's campaign. As court officers approached to escort her out, her final glare at Olivia contained all the venom of a woman who, for perhaps the first time in her privileged life, had been held accountable for her actions. Outside the courthouse in the golden late-afternoon sunlight, Maxwell, Olivia, Rachel, and Zoe gathered on the steps. The attorneys departed after accepting Maxwell's heartfelt thanks, leaving him and Olivia alone in the aftermath of their victory. "I should get back to Ethan," Maxwell said softly. "Mrs. Chen said he's been fussy all day, like he knows something's wrong." Olivia nodded, suddenly uncertain of her place now that the crisis had passed. "Of course, he needs his father." Maxwell studied her face. "He needs you too, Olivia. We both do." He took her hands in his. "Come home with me. Please." The simple plea, free of qualifications or explanations, broke through Olivia's last defenses. Tears she had refused to shed during the interrogation, during the hearing, during all the long months of struggle, finally escaped. "Yes," she whispered, "let's go home." The reunion with Ethan was everything Olivia had hoped for and feared. The moment she walked through the door, his wails from upstairs transformed into excited babbling. When she lifted him from his crib, his tiny hands patted, her face as if reassuring himself she was real, and the smile that bloomed across his features was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "I think he missed you," Maxwell said from the doorway, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "I missed him too," Olivia replied, pressing her face against Ethan's sweet-smelling hair. "More than I can say." The days that followed were a time of healing and recalibration. Eleanor, facing potential criminal charges and certain social disgrace, retreated to her winter home in Palm Beach. Brittany, who had cooperated with authorities regarding the medication theft, received probation and community service. The wealthy enclave of Westchester, always alert to shifts in the social hierarchy, gradually adjusted its attitude toward the Anderson household. Some of Maxwell's business associates, sensing which way the wind was blowing, reached out to renew connections. Invitations began to arrive again. Maxwell accepted some and declined others, more selective now about who he allowed into their lives. The most surprising development came from Catherine's father, William Whitmore, who arrived unannounced one afternoon, looking older and more subdued than Olivia had ever seen him. "I had no idea what Eleanor was doing," he told Maxwell in the living room, while Olivia listened from the kitchen, Ethan on her hip. "She kept me in the dark, told me you were refusing our visits. I should have questioned her more, should have reached out directly." He paused, emotion making his voice rough. "Catherine would be ashamed of how we've behaved," she always said. Her mother was controlling, but I never realized how far Eleanor would go. The reconciliation was tentative but genuine. William began visiting weekly, getting to know his grandson properly for the first time. Olivia watched the growing bond between them with a mixture of joy and wistfulness, thinking of her own child, who would never know such connections. Maxwell noticed her expression one evening after William had left. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, joining her on the terrace where she sat watching the sunset. "My son," she answered honestly. "What he might have been like at Ethan's age, who he might have become." She smiled sadly. "I'm always going to wonder." Maxwell took her hand. "Tell me about him." The simple invitation, offered without pity or discomfort, opened a door Olivia had kept carefully closed. She talked about her pregnancy, her hopes, the brief 3 days she'd had with her son. Maxwell listened without interruption, holding her hand, occasionally brushing away her tears with his thumb. "Thank you," she said when she'd finished, "for letting me remember him." "He'll always be part of you," Maxwell replied, "and that means he's part of our family too." The word family hung in the air between them, full of meaning and possibility. Over the past months, they had forged a connection unlike any either had experienced before, born of crisis, strengthened by shared purpose and deepened by mutual respect that had gradually transformed into something more. "I've been thinking," Maxwell said carefully, "about making our arrangement more permanent." Olivia's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I mean that Ethan loves you. You're the closest thing to a mother he's ever known, and legally that should be recognized." He paused, gathering courage. "I'd like to petition the court for you to have legal guardianship rights, co-parenting, formally recognized." Of all the possibilities Olivia had considered, this was the most unexpected. "You want me to legally be his parent, alongside you?" "Yes," Maxwell said simply. "You already are in every way that matters. This just makes it official, protects your relationship with him no matter what happens." The implication was clear. Even if their personal relationship changed, Olivia's connection to Ethan would be safeguarded. It was the most selfless offer anyone had ever made to her. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Maxwell replied. "Not for me, but for Ethan, and for yourself." Tears blurred her vision as she nodded. Yes. The legal process took months: evaluations, home studies, court appearances. But unlike their previous experience with the legal system, this time they moved forward together, with a clear purpose and without opposition. Judge Harrington, who presided over the guardianship hearing, seemed moved by their unconventional family's journey. "The court recognizes that families come in many forms," she stated as she approved the petition. "What matters is the love, stability and care provided to the child. In this case, it's clear that Ethan Anderson has found not one but 2 devoted parents who have overcome extraordinary obstacles to create a safe and nurturing home." The signed guardianship papers felt weightless in Olivia's hands, but carried the gravity of a lifetime commitment. She was now, in the eyes of the law, Ethan's parent alongside Maxwell, an arrangement nearly unprecedented in the conservative courts of Westchester County. Life settled into a new pattern. Olivia moved into the Anderson estate permanently, though she maintained her own room rather than sharing Maxwell's. Their relationship continued to evolve slowly, thoughtfully, both aware of the stakes involved and the complex emotions still healing within them. On the night of Ethan's first birthday, after a small celebration with William and a few close friends, Maxwell found Olivia in the nursery, watching their son sleep. "Happy?" he asked softly, coming to stand beside her. "More than I ever thought possible again," she admitted. "After I lost my baby, I thought that part of my life was over, that I'd never have a family, never be a mother." She turned to him, eyes shining in the dim light. "You gave me back something I thought was gone forever. You gave me something I never truly had," Maxwell replied. "Before you came into our lives, I was going through the motions, letting others raise my son, while I hid in work and grief. You taught me how to be a father, how to be present, how to love actively rather than abstractly." He took her hand, turning it over to trace the lines of her palm. "I don't know what the future holds for us, Olivia. I don't know if what we have will ever become more than it is now. But I do know that I want to find out slowly, day by day. No pressure, no expectations, just us figuring it out together." Olivia's heart filled with a quiet joy, different from the desperate happiness she'd known with Ethan in the early days, different from the triumphant relief of their legal victory. This was something steadier, more sustainable, a foundation on which a lifetime could be built. "I'd like that," she said simply, and leaned her head against his shoulder as they watched their son dream. 1 year later, on a perfect autumn day, Olivia stood in the small chapel of St. James Episcopal Church in Scarsdale, not as a bride but as a mother, holding Ethan's hand as he toddled down the aisle in a tiny suit, practicing for his role in the upcoming christening ceremony. Maxwell watched from the front pew, his expression soft with love for both of them. They had decided against marriage, at least for now. What they had built was something different, a family formed not by romantic love first, but by a shared love for a child, a shared commitment to his welfare above all else. Romance had grown slowly between them, unforced and natural, but they were in no rush to formalize it. The legal guardianship gave Olivia everything she needed to be Ethan's mother in the eyes of the world. William Whitmore sat nearby, now a regular presence in their lives. Eleanor remained in Florida, her legal troubles eventually settled with community service and a substantial fine, her social standing irreparably damaged. Brittany had moved to California, her brief notoriety faded. The scandal that had once consumed Westchester's attention had become yesterday's news, replaced by fresher gossip. What remained was what mattered, a little boy who called Olivia Mama and Maxwell Dada with equal love and trust, who was growing into a confident, joyful child surrounded by people who had fought for the right to love him. As Ethan reached the altar, stumbling slightly in his excitement, Olivia caught him before he fell. It was a metaphor for their journey, she thought, all of them stumbling forward, catching each other, finding balance together. The christening would make official what they already knew, that families were not defined by blood or marriage certificates or social conventions, but by love, by sacrifice, by showing up day after day through the hardest moments, by choosing each other again and again when it would be easier to walk away. Maxwell joined them at the altar, taking Ethan's other hand. Together they formed a circle, imperfect, unexpected, untraditional, but unbreakable in its strength. "Ready?" Maxwell asked, his question encompassing so much more than the practice run they were completing. Olivia looked at the man and the child who had healed her broken heart, who had given her a second chance at motherhood she had never